Welcome to Mind Over Matters, the live stream where your mind actually matters. My name is Simon, and hosting the show with me today is Adam and Samad. Every week, we discuss and debate the hottest topics as requested by our viewers and our listeners. We'll be live monitoring the chat and comments on YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, and Instagram. So please send in your questions or simply tell us what matters are on your mind. Today, we've got a very interesting show for you. We'll be covering two topics. One is the recent incident that occurred in France. You're probably aware of the gruesome beheading that occurred, and we'll be talking about the implications of that, what unfolded, some of the history behind that, and then we'll talk about move on to the topic of election predictions. So we've been promising that for some time now. Today's the day, or tonight's the night, I should say. We will be explaining our predictions, why we think the outcome will be the way it is, and any caveats we might have. So on that note, I'll hand it over to Adam to provide us some context around what's been happening in France.
So I guess the main thing, I guess, that's really been popping up in the news recently is on October 16th, a Chechen Muslim refugee was involved in a Islamic terrorist attack where he beheaded Samuel Paty, who, well, I think it's Paty, it's P-A-T-Y. I'm not sure if it's got any Frenchism in it, but he was a school teacher who held a class on freedom of speech, where he showed the Charlie Hebdo satirical cartoons. Now, I guess for some people, they might not know who Charlie Hebdo is, or not who. Well, I mean, there is also who, but they're a magazine in France that kind of garnered a lot of controversy back in 2015 when they published a bunch of satirical cartoon pictures of the Prophet Muhammad. And subsequently that led to a series of coordinated domestic terrorist attacks in France. The initial one that was at the Charlie Hebdo magazine headquarters led to the death of 17 people and killed 22 others. Now that's kind of like the front load of it. And again, given that and why it's controversial is because the depictions of the Prophet Muhammad is, I guess a sin in Islam, and so it's seen as heretical and a form of blasphemy, and hence why there was strong reaction. Well, I say strong reaction, but I guess terrorist attacks in France there was surrounding it. Now, strong reaction following those strong reaction, particular attacks, terrorist attacks kind of led to a few other strong reaction following those strong particular attacks, terrorist attacks in a few other France. Strong reaction following those particular attacks, terrorist attacks in a few other France. Strong reaction following those it's all kind of important, like now, because of France. Strong reaction why it's all kind of important with those now, because of France. Strong reaction why it's all kind of important with those now, because of France. It was actually a topic that why it's all kind of important with those now, it was actually a topic that why it's all kind of important now, it was actually a topic that why it's all kind of now, it was actually a topic that why it's all kind of now, it was actually a topic that why it's all kind of now, it was actually a topic that why it's all kind of now, it was actually a topic that why it's all kind of now, it was actually a topic that why it's all kind of now, it was actually a topic that why it's all kind of it was actually a topic that why it's all kind of it was actually a topic that
So that's why Muslims or being seen as an idol to prevent any depictions of him. Now, the interesting thing is that Muslims themselves, in Andalusia, for example, in Spain, and in Baghdad, actually, some artists did depict the Prophet, peace be upon him. And although it's rare to find those images, but it wasn't completely, like today in Islam, it's considered completely heretical. And you'll find people, responding with or some people, I shouldn't say lots, but certainly some people will respond with violence. But it hasn't always been the case, and you will find, although rare, you will find
certain traditions. Yeah,
and I think what the differentiator is now is that some of these depictions are to spite Muslims, because Muslims can be quick to respond, and so it's a predictable response that if Charlie Hebdo or a far right individual or someone that's anti-Islamic or wants to incite Muslims, they can either burn the Quran or draw a it's not like it's just draw Muhammad. It's that they're drawing him in in very lewd ways, and I think that's triggered some of these reactions, and that's not to say that we haven't had similar reactions from some Muslims, even when it's just a general depiction of him. But in this context, in the context of Charlie Hebdo, it has been very crude and lewd depictions of a sacred figure. Now, I think we should all be clear here that no one on this panel condones what happened. That is horrific, and it should be said. Although I know that we shouldn't need to say it, but I think sometimes it's
I don't know. I think it needs to be said. Like, no way, it needs to be said.
I mean, I think there's an expectation that if you are Muslim, that there's an expectation to condemn these attacks, and I'm not. I don't like that reaction, but I don't like to just because something horrible has happened and a Muslim's committed an atrocious act, that therefore all Muslims need to come and apologize and condemn that. And we don't see that kind of reaction from others. We don't expect when far right people are also doing attacks, that we don't expect that all whites should apologize or condemn those attacks. Certainly politicians should go up and condemn them, but regular people like you and I don't think that's something we should expect of each other.
Well, I also don't think it harms by condoning, not condoning, sorry, by there's no harm in not condoning, condemning. Well,
condemning. I think we need to be very careful about what words.
Co-signing these kind of barbaric attacks, really. And I think in particular, I think why this particular case is quite egregious too, because I think 7 people, maybe like 15 people initially were arrested in connection to this particular attack, but I think it's now gone down to about 7. And there were people from, sorry?
No, you're right.
Yeah. And so there are people from like the Islamic community that have assisted him with this particular attack too. Two of the students were apparently paid about £300 At least this is what the initial courts kind of, I guess, news coming out of the courts are saying, that they were paid about £300 to identify the teacher for the killer. And then there was like a father of one of the students. He was like involved in.
He's the one who initially posted on Facebook complaining about it, from what I understand, and I think that was the starting point of the whole
and
thing.
He apparently like exchanged texts with him as well. Like there was at least some kind of communication. It doesn't mean like, again, we don't know what the context of these texts are, but there's clearly some kind of connection between him and this person too. And then I think there was like an imam from one of the mosques was also involved in, I guess, the social media campaign, and like wanted to talk to like the principal and stuff, like, you know, in regards to this, like the teacher and the class that he was teaching. And I guess that's the current situation over there.
I just to add to that, the arrests of the two students who pointed out who the teacher was, they apparently were paid £300, as I think you mentioned, Adam, to point out the teacher. I don't think it's too early to say whether those two students knew that this guy was going to behead, or was going to do something violent. I think he, from what I've read today, is that what was his name? Abdullah, was it?
I don't know what his name, and I really don't think terrorists should really be remembered by the name anyway.
Yeah,
so
look, I think
really important.
So let's call him the terrorist.
Let's
say, so the terrorist approached a number of students to identify this teacher, and these two students agreed. And from what the two students are alleging is that the terrorist said he would just exchange words with him and threaten him not to and get him to apologize for what he's done in depicting the Prophet. And I don't think those students, again, I mean, I don't know the age of those students. They could be 14. They could be 15.
They're underage, and that's why their identity has been kept a secret.
I think it'll be very, to try them for aiding and abetting a terrorist, I think is the wrong approach. And I don't think even the French courts, as as Islamophobic as they may be, will probably not hold them to that degree.
Well, I mean, they're not going to be tried as adults if they are going to be tried with anything. So
and the parent who ran a social media campaign was trying to encourage or trying to rally other Muslims to protest at the school and get the school and the teacher to apologize and to stop portraying the images of the Prophet. Now, what's interesting is the teacher. Was it Samuel Paddy?
Yeah, Samuel Paddy.
Samuel Paddy has been running this particular class for some time, and for several years. In fact, since the 2015 Charlie Hebdo attack, has been running a class for kind of freedom of expression, freedom of speech. In that class, he's been showing these images of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and it hasn't really. It hasn't got the widespread attention in the previous years as it had in this year. It seems like there's one particular parent who's been super ticked off by this, and would not quit, and he's got taken to Facebook, he's taken to YouTube, he's gone to the school, he's gone to the teacher, he's gone to the police, and it's created enough drama for other people outside of the school to have heard about what's going on. And I don't think it also, as horrible as what has occurred here, I don't think it's fair to also say that this individual, this parent, has incited terrorism. And again, I don't think that's what's been
Well,
claimed
we
here.
won't know. Well, we won't know until like
Until
I don't think,
the
yeah, I
case
don't
is-
think those kind of statements is appropriate either, because we won't know until
Complete
more
investigation.
information comes out from the actual court case, right? Like, again, he was in contact with the killer. We don't know if
Has that been said
Yeah,
that
yeah,
he's been
yeah.
in contact with the killer?
Yeah. So let me see if I can grab
Look,
a.
I think when you say
that.
if he's been in contact with a killer, I think there's many ways to look at it, right? Like I'm sure because of his campaign, he would have been in contact with a lot of different people. No, it really depends on like what kind of
Yeah,
information.
that's what I was saying. We won't really know until
Yeah,
more information
the
coming
details,
out.
the
That's the
details of the
reason why I'm saying
conversation comes out. Yeah,
we can't say that he isn't, and we also can't say that
He is. Yeah,
he is. Yeah,
right. So
yeah, that's a very fair point, Adam. I think it's it's too early in the investigation. I mean, if you're saying the 2015 attacks are now only the court appearances are occurring now, it's taken what 5 years,
5, 6 maybe.
so
like,
it may be 2 or 3 years before we hear the evidence.
yeah.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
absolutely, it's so disturbing to see things like this take place. It's like imagine. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. Look, the parent was genuinely concerned, right? Because they could be from a very conservative background, and in their eyes, and what they were seeing, or what their kids were seeing, was it is extremely problematic from a Muslim's point of view, and to publicly talk about it because of course the government, in one way or another, supports that level of freedom of speech, right? Charlie Hebdo is allowed to operate as as a publisher of these cartoons. Now, of course, if you're going to take this to social media, you don't know what kind of people you attract, and you don't know what their motives are, because I think that's the biggest problem, right? And these extreme elements, what they do is they make the case worse, right? They harm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they harm people. They harm people to prove their point, which in return ends up proving the other party's point anyway, right? Like, the reason why these cartoons are now being projected onto government buildings is it's out of they're doing it to show the terrorists that we will express our our freedom of speech, no matter what.
It's a strange way of saying to the terrorists that you haven't won.
You haven't won. Yeah.
I mean, I don't even think it's strange. It's just showing solidarity with a guy who got beheaded for freedom of speech in France, right? Like, it's kind of interesting to see that, like it seems to be it's exactly like what Samad said, right? Like, it's by going out there and committing like terrorist attacks, you're only proving them correct,
Yeah.
right? And
You're
you
only
don't want to
proving
give
their point.
don't give him any ammunition, right? Like, again, it kind of reminds me of the Barbara Streisand effect. I don't know if you guys know
The Streisand effect.
Yeah. The Streisand effect. And for people who don't know, Barbara Streisand, famous celebrity, had her, I think, her house, right? Paparazzi took a picture of her house, and she tried, tooth and nail to try and get the picture of her house removed, right? Because it's my house, it's got to be private. I don't want people knowing where I live. But by trying to hide, the location of her house, it only publicized it more, and more people ended up knowing where she lived, and that kind of has been going on to say, like Simon said, the Streisand effect, right?
Yeah.
And this is like a perfect example of the Streisand effect, because something that would have just been innocuous, because again, political cartoons have existed for decades. They've been making political cartoons about Jesus Christ. They've been making political cartoons about many other religions, many other people.
Look, I think the difference is the Christian world in recent times anyway hasn't retaliated on the same level as the Muslims. So these publishers find extra amusement and extra pleasure in trying to go after Prophet Muhammad, right? Because think about it.
But again, it doesn't really justify like the reaction.
Oh no,
happening.
I mean, I don't think I ever said that it justifies.
No, I know you're not. But again, like, they're doing it. Don't respond.
Yeah. Yeah,
don't respond.
I mean, look, there are
yeah.
other ways to respond. Um, there are better ways to use that as a, almost like a segue to
Okay, so
introduce real Islam. I think the Mormons did that with the
the
Book
Book
of
of
Mormon.
Mormon
Yeah, the Book of Mormon, where
and their magical underpants. By the way, if people haven't seen it, I would highly recommend. I think there's like a movie adaptation of like the Book of Mormon.
yeah,
I highly recommend it. It's very good. And there's also a South Park episode about the Book of Mormon, which is very, very accurate. But actually, it actually kind of reminds me. South Park actually depicted Muhammad in a earlier episode of like the Super Friends. I think that's what they were called. They were just like a bunch of religious figures. Like it had Jesus, it had like Buddha, and it had Muhammad. That was like one episode of like South Park, and they already depicted the Prophet Muhammad, and they didn't. It didn't get any kind of like large controversy. Many years passed, and then they had like another episode that they were going to release
yeah,
that depicted the Prophet Muhammad, and all of a sudden it got a bunch of backlash controversy, very similar to like what you were saying as well, Sam, about how like this was an example of one parent or one person who just kind of got the news that like, oh, like this teacher was teaching this in a class, I'm gonna make a big noise about it, right? And in a very
yeah,
similar way that happened on South Park, and in the end what they ended up doing is they just censored, like they just put a black bar over it, and they even like over the prophet Muhammad, like in the episode they just put just a big black bar on it, and they changed the whole episode just to kind of point out the censorship that they were actually trying to be forced to do by their network. And again, it's another example of the Streisand effect, right?
yeah,
It just brought more attention to something that really should have not. It should have just went back into the annals of history, and nobody would have remembered it. Much like the earlier episode of South Park too.
It's a tricky balance because on the one hand, Muslims in the West
yeah,
they don't want to normalize depictions of the Prophet, and on the other hand, you don't want to react to every single incident of people, some who are doing it, like this history teacher is doing it for as part of a school curriculum,
yeah,
and others who are doing that quite maliciously, right? And not to say the people who do it maliciously, deserve to be murdered, but it's a tricky balance for Muslims because they want to protect the sacredness of the Prophet by not depicting him, but at the same time, how do you strike that balance between that and the fact that living in the West means that some people are going to be depicting him and for sometimes with malicious intent. So it's a tricky balance. I'm not sure where the right balance, what the solution might be. I think maybe somewhere to start. I think if we're talking about radicalization of certain Muslims, that certainly is something we've been talking about for now 2.5 decades.
yeah,
I think the Muslim communities around the world have been trying to address that. But at the same time, I think you can't say, okay, there's some radical elements within, radical, let's call it, radical Islamic elements within France that operate. But I think the French shouldn't also be oblivious to the fact that the version of secularism that they follow is also radical secularism. Adam looks a little bit confused. So the reason I'm kind of saying radical secularism is the version of secularism they have in France. If I'm pronouncing this correctly, my son's actually learning French, so he'll be able to correct me. But what is it? Laissez-faire?
Let's go with that.
Yeah,
let's go with that. Let's go with that.
That version of secularism is like, it is, no depiction, no religious symbols in public spaces, within government, within even public areas, which is a very, very radical interpretation of secularism that is not, you won't find that in the United States, Australia, Canada, in every other secular Western country. So France has a very radical form of secularism, and the reason I want to bring that up is because that radical form of secularism is going to come into contact with a radical form of some radical Muslims, and there's something.
I mean,
There's going to be that
even just
tension.
say I wouldn't even just say radical Muslims. It could be literally anyone. Right now, it's you see more in terms of religious terrorism. You see more of that from Muslims, but it could be anyone else too because it's not just the Muslims.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And historically, you're right. Historically, the Catholics within France have had lots of issues with this, radical secularism that's practiced in France.
Yeah.
And if you go through terrorist attacks historically within France, you'll find quite a few terrorist acts committed by Catholics because they were also coming to grips with this, radical secularism within France.
You see, the problem here is to be fair, when I say that, Charlie Hebdo and many other satirical, newspapers that kind of do depictions of religious figures and stuff, when they do like a depiction of Jesus, it's not even in America, which is very Catholic Christian like nation. When they do a depiction of Jesus, it's not like all the Christians just like be quiet and they're well behaved and they don't cause a fuss about it. They're not happy but the difference is that they don't go and then behead someone. That's the difference, right?
They don't anymore. Today. But also it's kind of
from a contemporary.
It may sound like a comparable example, but it's not, because while Jesus is revered as God, it's not prohibited to depict him. In fact, every church has several depictions of Jesus Christ hanging off a cross.
But in France, they don't have blasphemy laws, right? Like they don't have blasphemy laws in France, and that would be like the main basis in which people are. Presenting that, this kind of retaliation against a satirical cartoon isn't okay, right? Obviously, like you said, Muslims, they don't need to depict the Prophet Muhammad in a disparaging manner or draw him, etc. But the rest of the population aren't, governed by these rules, and they shouldn't be, I guess. Under Islamic rules around blasphemy. But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
The point I'm trying to mention is that if you look at let's say United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're a secular liberal nation. They have a large Muslim population. And as far as I'm aware, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's been several incidents of
I actually don't know
depictions of Prophet Muhammad burning the Quran that hasn't resulted in beheadings.
I remember I think in Texas there was a terrorist attack that was
there was a terrorist attack. Yeah.
And
in one of the I think it was a competition to draw. The Prophet in.
I think that happened after the first. That was inspired by, what happened in Paris, the Charlie Hebdo shootings. The first time that happened, I think that was done in retaliation. I wouldn't even call it
the attacks.
Yeah.
So like as in
it's like you can't stop us.
To show solidarity, so to speak. They had this competition, and then there were people who rocked up, and given like Texas is like an open carry state, it did not end well.
So I think if the intent of all countries is to kind of have some social cohesion between the people, some of that is a give and take, and it doesn't mean that Muslims should expect the French to forego their their version of secularism. But what it does mean is that I think leaders within France, both religious leaders and political figures within France, should understand that that Muslims hold this to be very sacred, and should be respected, that if someone, that this is something that's sacred. You have your right to free speech and freedom of expression, and and to exercise that right, but with good intention, right? I don't think it would have made a difference for Samuel Paty. I think he's a teacher. He was just teaching a class, but I think it would make a difference to Muslims that are living in France today that feel like they're alienated.
And that's a, by the way, sorry to cut you off, Sam. By and large, that's a very common opinion. That's how a lot of Muslim feels, and I'm talking about scholars who are French Algerians who've moved to France, and these are learned people, and they also feel like there is a disconnect between the the ruling party as well as the Muslim the Muslim community, and just so you guys know, Muslims in France has the most Muslims compared to any other European country, and so they make up a big minority, if I must say. So, in order for them, of course, we always talk about integration, but I think in a way, you can't just pin it at that, because there are Muslims who are fourth and fifth generation French, so they're as French as it can get, right? They may have a Muslim background, but they've been there for a very long time. So it's not like you can tell them to go somewhere, and where would they go?
Yeah, and I don't even want to get into the reason why there's a large North African heritage population that lives in France. I mean, that's an issue of colonialism. I don't think it's in the context of what happened to Samuel Paty. I don't even think it's
no, it's not. It's not.
Oh yeah, it's not
appropriate.
relevant.
I don't think it's.
It's not
I don't
relevant.
think even it's appropriate to talk about that.
Yeah.
But what it's worth talking about is that Muslims do feel alienated, and there are large Muslim ghettos in France that is kind of isolated from the rest of, let's say, larger metropolitan French society.
I've actually been to one.
Yeah, and you've visited France,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you've experienced this firsthand. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that, about your experience.
Yeah, so it was literally by chance that I walked into one of those ghettos, and I must say, the environment changes so quickly. It's absolutely insane. Like, you go there and you just feel like you're not even in Paris. It just feels like a third world country. Everything just looks, run down. Of course, it's not clean. You do feel, you kind of feel threatened, even though there is no threat. Like, no one came up to me, no one bothered me, any of that. But it just feels like a threatening environment. And as far as my experience in France is concerned, I did have a lot of instances where, the waiters or the waitresses just ignored me, and they would serve the person who walked in right after me, and I'm just standing there, and I wasn't even speaking in English. I was trying to speak in French, for just a simple French, nothing too fancy. But
Parlez-vous
yeah,
Français?
yeah. Like, I'll look up before I go in, just to make sure I'm not, and I'll like listen to it to try and mimic it. And all I wanted was a coffee. Nothing. I wasn't looking for a meal, but even just to get a coffee, it became like a mission. And that's a sentiment that a lot of people say, the way that French people view Islam. By and large,
I think it's not just Islam. It's
to
Islam
everyone.
particularly. It's disproportionately Muslims and black people in France, but but it's also other people from
just
other parts of Europe.
non-French. The French, just non-French. Like it's really funny because like a very similar experience. I haven't been to France, but I've talked to people who've been to France. Like I remember I had friends who went to Paris, like, oh, romantic. We're gonna go to Paris and have a romance. They were very disappointed. By the way, because again, like the kind of romanticism of France isn't what like is kind of historically to be remembered to be.
The
But,
bakeries are amazing, by the way. If you the croissants that you have, just unmatched.
Unmatched. Yeah, it's actually really funny because they were saying, my friends were saying like, they were going down and there were like, kind of like people playing like music on the streets for people. You could hire them. So I'm like, oh, that's really cool. It's good to see like, it still retains like a lot of other kind of interesting historical things that it's known for. But they were saying like, they went to, go get food and like they were trying to order it and the waitress like as they found out, pretended that they didn't understand English, and was basically trying to make them say it in French, like almost as like a humiliation. It's like, oh, pronounce like omelette du fromage, and if you don't say it properly, or if you don't say it at all, you won't get served, right? And so they were more or less kind of made to say what they wanted to order, and then it became very clear that yes, the person that was serving them could speak English, but just made them on purpose say it in French. It seems to be like some kind of like weird and it's not the first time that I've heard this either. It's almost like a weird like humiliation ritual that's like over there. It's like a hazing, right? But yeah, it seems like
humiliation ritual.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems to be, right, and it's not just like Europe was in war for like a very long time with each other, and like the French, the English, they don't get along. French, English, Irish, like all of them don't get along. Like, and it's not too surprising that like if they can't even get along with their neighbors, they're not going to get along with foreign nationals either. And this
I mean, but the French aren't banning bad teeth, because the British have it. They're banning the face coverings and
even during COVID, when you're supposed to wear a face mask, you can't wear.
I wouldn't.
So while the French have and again we're generalizing here, so I've met some lovely French people, but since we're generalizing, that they do have a dislike for non-French people, but a particular dislike for Muslims, and so Samad, if you can bring that quote up. So one of the experiences that you described is in this quote, and I don't know if you can kind of bring that up.
I'm trying to find that. I'm trying to find that folder to begin with.
In the meantime, I'm going to ask you a bonus question. Is this the filibuster?
Is this folder you're talking about, Simon? Is this on the OneNote?
No. It should be on the OBS.
Chat.
Oh, right, on the OBS.
So on OBS in the middle box down the bottom, there's the EP12 folder.
Well, welcome to the.
I'm doing this from memory. So
welcome to the
secret
technical difficulty section. But I was going to ask my secret bonus filibuster question is.
Here we.
Okay, so you've got it up.
Yep, I've got it up.
So this is a quote from a prominent novelist in France, Virginie Despentes. So in France, we are supposedly not racist, and yet the last time a waiter refused to serve me, I was with an Arab. The last time I was told to show my ID, I was with an Arab. The last time a person I was waiting for almost missed a train because police stopped her, she was black. And so this sentiment is similar to kind of your experience, Samad, is and also the what you've described, Adam, and it seems to be pretty common, but also disproportionately affects blacks and Arabs, Muslims, and so it is a problem, and it's something that France has to deal with. For them to just say.
This is just how we are.
Or to quote Macron, and I think this leads on to the next part of this issue, is the statement that Macron made, and I'm just kind of trying to bring that statement up, but you can probably remove the other quote now. But the statement that Macron made, he said, he described Islam as a religion that is in crisis all over the world today. And I think that's the statement that really riled up a few people, particularly the Arab world, and then Erdogan. So President Erdogan from France, from Turkey. As a result of that comment that Macron made, he said Macron needs mental treatment. And as a result of what Erdogan said, France recalled the ambassador from Turkey. So there's been a bit of a back and forth exchange, and there's also been a boycott on French products.
Yeah, in the UAE, I think.
UAE,
yeah. They've removed a lot of their cosmetic products off the shelves completely.
And I think if I wanted to just come back to that statement that Macron made, so he said Islam is in crisis all over the world today, and after an attack, really by one individual, and then if you look at the incidents of terrorism in France over the last 5 years, that 2015 was a spike because of the attack in Nice, but and I looked at the stats earlier today. The number of terrorist attacks is actually going down since 1990 until right down to 2020. So. And to kind of remark that Islam is in crisis all over the world, what Macron is doing is he's trying to appeal to some, because next year it's an election year that's coming up, so he's trying to appeal to some of the more
the right-wing nationalist elements.
Nationalist right-wing individuals within France, so that he can beat Le Pen, who's also going to be running for the elections next year. So it sounds to me like he's playing a political game, and again, Muslims are in between. Right in the middle of it, and scapegoating Muslims for your political purposes, I think, is very horrible. It's a horrible thing to do, especially after such a tragic attack. To then use that attack to garner support from the right, so you can win a political election the following year. It's horrible.
Well, you got to remember, his opposition is also right wing, so they were going to use that anyway. And what he's doing is trying to capitalize on that side of the voter base, right? And
Marine Le Pen was up against Macron like
last time.
Years ago,
yeah,
right?
last election.
Which was how long ago now?
I think it's 5-year term, isn't it?
5 years.
Okay,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because the name Le Pen sounded very familiar. I'm like, didn't he run? Didn't she lose to him? Yeah. Didn't she lose to him? Yeah.
She
was afraid.
Marginally lost to him.
So she was quite popular.
She was, and she represents the populist movement in France, and I think she stands a good chance again in the next election. So Macron is, as you mentioned, Samad, trying to capitalize on a horrific attack, and again scapegoating Muslims. And it's not the first time. I mean, we've seen over the last 5 years the wearing of the full face covering has been banned, is criminalized. In France, we've seen even wearing the hijab, which is just a head covering, that has been now. I think that's banned in like government jobs or jobs for inside kind of the public sphere. You can wear it out on streets and in the public, but just not in government buildings and things like that. So it is, and this is why I say it is French free expression or secularism, I should say, but it does come across as quite a radical secularism to me.
To be honest, for me, in ways, it's very ironic. It's like you have freedom of expression, but as much as they want to talk about how free they are to express themselves, you're still not free to express the way you want to dress, right?
Yeah.
You
Well,
can,
I mean, in the
yeah,
end, then
Well,
you can title it, oh, this is religious attire, or this is this, this is that. At the end of the day, it is.
well,
If you
I
don't have
think
freedom, if you don't have freedom,
secularism trumps freedom of expression in France.
yeah,
So if you look at
yeah, the
the
separation of
trade-off,
church from
yeah,
yeah, I guess yeah, functionally. So for people who know, like the separation of church and state, that's what
yeah,
they
yeah,
prioritize.
yeah.
So yeah, I think yeah, I mean that's the decision they've gone for, and in the end, like that's the thing, like in the end, yeah, there has to be some solution to like the problem with social cohesion in France. Obviously, people shouldn't fall for the bait. Like even if these people are trying to like rile up
mm,
the Muslim community, there has to be a movement for like internally to kind of resist the temptation,
mm,
at least from reacting in a negative way. Because I don't know how because in the end, like even if they want to be respectful and in the end, if they treat like Islamic ideas as sacred cows, then that's
mm,
already going against the kind of freedom of speech that they're trying to project out there in France. So I don't know if there's ever a balance. Like
mm,
either we don't depict um, like Islamic ideas politically at all, or we do and suffer the consequences. We don't want
mm.
they don't want to live. We don't want to put people in an environment where they have to fear Islam or fear the people, because the average person in Islam isn't violent, right? The average person isn't going to, conduct themselves in an inappropriate manner like we've been seeing with this attack, right? So there has to be the middle ground where there is a communication that yes, this is something that will be happening in France, and have to work together that no, this isn't a personal attack on the community.
Well,
It has to be something that
I
look,
completely agree with that,
yeah,
wholeheartedly, Adam. But the problem I see is that politicians, and it's not just France, they do it here too, is
they
that
do it everywhere. Yeah,
is they find a minority community that has media attention, and they'll scapegoat them for political gain. So if we want to tackle the root cause of the problems, it's, well, how do we increase social cohesion? Is how do you get rid of these ghettos in France, right? So you need to give opportunities for people that are living in these ghettos, and how do you give them those opportunities? So it's especially
it's
when
a
some of
vicious
these are,
cycle. It's a vicious
it is, some
cycle,
of these
right?
people, as you mentioned, some are
Yeah.
fifth generation living in France, and their condition is not getting better.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, you would expect, after being there for so long, uh,
poverty is generally generational. Like
yeah,
it's not something that's easy
is-
to escape.
yeah, but except if the system doesn't support you anyway or has marginalized you.
or the system goes out of its way to marginalize you.
Yeah,
If you want social
what do you,
cohesion, and then the system goes out of its way to marginalize
yeah.
you, it doesn't work.
And we've seen this not just here, we've seen this happen in the US. You hear the same thing that, oh, go get a job, but how do you get a job when no one wants to give you one? So you work at, whatever's given to you,
Uh,
and it's usually not.
the beard that I have here, people in France, just a security guard in France, right, can be fired for having this kind of beard, because it's an expression of their religiosity. And so this is I was doing some reading some articles today, and a few of these incidents in France has occurred. A woman, an 18-year-old who decided to wear a hijab,
Yeah.
goes into a bank to withdraw $1,500 from her bank account, and she's not permitted because the officer in the bank notified the police in case she was taking that money to fund terrorism. Like, these things don't make it easier for Muslims, and does if you want social cohesion, this is not the way to go about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think the message that I would have for fellow Muslims is it's always easy to get emotional, but what we need to realize is, as a community, where we stand. And I think at the forefront, you have to remember, the experiences that Prophet Muhammad went through. So, the way that he was abused by his tribe, in the beginning. He had rubbish thrown on him, but didn't mean that, someone went after the lady who did it. Instead, he was kind to her because he tried to show what he was, preaching. So I think before, you get aggressive and you get emotional, and I know everyone, one way or another, you know, has the motive to protect you know the integrity of the religion and maintain the respect for the prophet. But we have to remember that every action we do in its name reflects on the community. And if we start doing the right thing, if we start, if we go back and see what the prophet used to do in these cases and take that forward, we'll be in a much better place. And that starts with educating ourselves, learning to be a model Muslim and then a model citizen alongside, being a model Muslim. You'll realize that, people will always have something to say, to criticize, to critique when it comes to the prophet and the religion itself. But your actions alone can change the opinions of many. So you can't go around telling people to do otherwise, because it's never going to happen. Just the way you don't want to follow the French way of life, where religion is a very private thing. You want to express your religion, right? Like, you want to be out, you want to, wear your beard, you want to wear your hijab. Same way, it goes both ways. So just because, just like how you don't want them to force you, you can't force them either. But what you can do is set a good example and just let the world, decide for itself.
Yeah, it's a very strong message there, Samad. And just to reinforce what you said there, just if you look at the studies around those who are inclined towards violent extremism, the less religious you are,
Yep.
the more likely you are to be involved in violent extremism. And so, in fact, religiosity is a bulwark against extremism.
Yeah.
And so,
if you understand the religion for what it is, if you understand the tenets of the religion, you wouldn't be inclined to do these things. What's happened is people have twisted these words to fit their own agenda. It's been politicized, been weaponized. And it's always the case. You talk to anyone who, has extreme right wing views. They've taken and blown things out of proportion. And you look at any interviews from someone who's, a terrorist, and you'll notice that they've twisted everything to suit their agenda. So I think that's what I find. The more you get closer to God, you will be less likely to make these mistakes and commit these horrendous crimes.
What about ways of? I mean, I know it's going to be the three of us can't, solve the problem here.
Why not?
What are some of the?
Let's solve it right now. Let's
start with world peace.
But we'll save that for another show.
Yeah, definitely. We can
Everything
do that
starts with you.
in a 2-hour show. But
Everything
in
starts
terms
with
of
you.
some of the solutions, what would you say, Adam? I think you mentioned one is an objective is social cohesion. How do we achieve that?
Oh, how do we solve social cohesion? I don't have a solution for that one. Sorry, no, I don't. Sorry, I'm already ruining.
You've come unprepared, Adam.
No, well, it's really
What
hard
happened,
because
Google?
What happened? No, well, it's really hard because, for example, I think with, a lot of studies looking into, like homogeneity within a population is quite important for social cohesion, right? So the more same we are, the more we're going to get along, right?
Yeah.
So the problem is, like, a lot of studies looking into things like diversity. Like diversity negatively correlates with social stability as well. So if we're going to be,
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know
yeah,
if I agree with that. I mean, I
well,
just wanted to give you one example of why I don't agree with that
sure,
statement.
go ahead.
Is if you look at United States, that there's the left and right are demographically, right, ethnically the same, right, in the United States, but they're polar opposites. So I don't know whether,
It's more about
in
your
fact,
ideas.
you can be Muslim, you can be black, you can be a Jew, and you could have more in common with the left than let's say a white male in the left has in common with a white male on the right.
Yeah, political extremism is still different from, like, I guess, I guess like cultural makeup, right? Like people who are culturally different are not going to get along, right? And that's not something that's dependent on your skin color either, right? So when I say diversity, it doesn't necessarily mean like your skin color, or it doesn't mean your what is it, your political, because that's the thing, it all encompasses the same thing, right? So the more homogenic we are, so the more same, right, rather than heterogenic, the more homogenic we are, the more likely we're going to get along. Now, and it kind of and it's kind of hard because, like, for example, if we kind of simplify it from,
I know, Adam, like I just want to I really strongly, so this room, I'm really strongly disagree with that, because
okay, so
even within Muslims, for example, even within Muslims, right?
Okay, yeah,
you could
sure.
be ethnically from Bangladesh. You could have this. You live in the same district. You could have the same class. You could be from the same class, and you could be, very, very polar opposite. Like, extreme. One can be very, very, and very well, Samad, and we all do, like, Muslims themselves have issues within themselves that they need to resolve.
Sure, but groups of Muslims are going to get along with groups of Muslims more than they are groups of Christians. Like that's like,
disagree.
I disagree,
Completely
man.
disagree.
I disagree.
Yeah, I mean, you may disagree,
I've heard about this. I've heard about this homogenous. The more homogenous a society is, the more likely they are to get along. And
I don't think it's that simple.
But again, I think you're failing to understand, like, what I'm saying. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be homogenic on everything, right? It's the more homogenic we are, the better. That's it. Like, sorry, I wouldn't say better, but more in terms of social cohesion. For example, it all kind of stems, like, for example, your family, right? Your direct family is someone who you're going to have a lot of social cohesion with because they're your family, right? As opposed to, and then
I mean, you don't have a choice. You kind of have to.
Well, I mean,
your family.
Well, I mean,
you don't get to choose them.
Well, luckily in this day and age, not everybody gets along with their family, and so, I don't want to say for sure, right? But and then you have your close social linkages. So if they're not your direct family, they could be friends, they could be allies, trading partners, whatever you want to say it is. And then you form like a tribe. And then tribes can expand to, states, countries, and each, like, kind of like, everybody forms their own kind of separate, from an evolutionary perspective, their own kind of unique social fingerprint, compared to another tribe. Now, if you're going to interact with another culture or another group of people who evolved completely different to you, you're going to fundamentally interact better and have more social cohesion from your own tribe than something that is outside your tribe. It's also seen as social in-groups or social out-groups.
In-group, out-group,
right?
Yep.
And that's the behavior that I'm fundamentally going to, right? Your in-groups and out-groups. So the more similar you are, or the more same you are, the more likely there's going to be social cohesion. Now, some might argue things like, well, what you were saying with France, right? How they're going for the, radical secularism or whatever.
Oh, Adam's using the term.
I like it. I like it. Radical secularism. But but the reason why I say it is because,
if they can consider wearing hijab a radical move, then I'm pretty sure we can call them a radical for banning them. right?
But what I'm saying is, like, if they say, well, if we kind of level the playing field and say, well, nobody's wearing any kind of religious symbols or headdresses or whatever it may be, then it's all from the point of zero, right? We're more the same than we are different, right? That's probably, again, it's part of, I guess, the notion of separating church from state, right? So if we all kind of look more similar, then there will be more social cohesion. Whether or not I necessarily agree or disagree, that's a completely different
Yeah.
question. But
Well, I
but
think
that's what I'm trying to say.
I think what we can say for a fact, it hasn't worked in France
yeah,
because we have a large minority of people who who
and
are
a
completely
growing
alienated,
minority,
and
by
then a
the
growing
way.
minority. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, but again, like that's where I'm coming from when I say social in-groups and out-groups,
Yeah.
right? The more similar you are, the more likely you're going to get along. That's fundamentally it. There's plenty of studies that go into it. I'm more than happy to try and find one that I have available. But in the meantime, yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't answer the question about solving social cohesion. My apologies. But feel free.
I think you did it. No,
each of
you did
to,
it. That
to
was
tackle it.
that's. I mean, social cohesion is important, and it's sometimes maybe some of the studies will be confronting to us, but they are what they are, right? And we have to
It's part of
face
the process. It's part
the
of the process
studies.
of understanding.
But
Yeah.
this is the problem. The more like again, everybody has differences. Like it's gonna happen, right? And if even if it's like tribe blue or tribe red, like they're just gonna hate each other because they're different colors, right? And it's purely it's a survival mechanism, right? To because again, familiarity is what enables like a species to survive. You're gonna, if you recognize something, whether it's good or bad, it's like how even like my cat, instinctively will see something that kind of looks like a snake and she'll like respond to it, right? Even if it isn't a real snake, they have like an innate kind of response mechanism to something that
it's game recognized game.
Game recognized gang, exactly. And in that same way, we react positively to things that we are more familiar with, and so that's fundamentally how it is. And it's all about trying to bridge that gap and try and figure out, well, yeah, we are more similar than we are different. Even though like if you look at on average we have like less than 5 fingers, and that's just because some people are born with less than 5 fingers, and that just brings the average down to less than 5, right? But on average we all have 5 fingers. We all have two arms on average, one head generally. So in that way we're more similar than we are different, and it's all about trying to figure out and get
It's about
to
the middle
everyone,
ground. Yeah.
that like someone said, there's middle ground. We are more same than we are different, and it is.
We're all trying to figure out where that middle ground is, and it's happening in France, it's happening in the United States,
It's
although
happening here
maybe
as
in the
well.
US they're moving further away from the middle. Samad, how about you? We're not expecting a solution to the problem, but what are some of the maybe suggestions you can make?
Well, I think a lot of that's really before you can talk about different processes or different settings and different scenarios that could enable us to be more united. I feel like a lot of that really comes down to your mindset itself. Whether or not you want to bridge that gap between different people. So keeping that in mind, I feel like I do believe that what needs to first change is our mindset and how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive others. As long as you hold on to negative biases against people, we won't be able to achieve anything. You can pass whatever legislation, whatever law you want to pass in whatever part of the world. If what's inside our hearts doesn't change, nothing else will change. And I think that's also reflective in a lot of different communities. But we don't even have to look too far. We can talk about our Muslim community. And we've got different camps, of course. Everyone sees the religion in their own perspective, and I feel like we're still learning to to agree to disagree. in a lot of key aspects, like to learn to respect each other, where there's a difference of opinion, especially when it comes to people who are not, who are not scholars. And scholars are more, they're more open to different interpretation, different ideas. But when it comes to the general public, we're ready to die on the hill, for a particular, particular interpretation, right? And I think again, in order for, let's say, in this case, let's say the Muslim community in France, and the European French people, to bridge that gap in between those two communities. Firstly, we've I think we've already talked about the Muslim community, but in terms of the French community, they need to let go of, the elitist mindset where they think they're better than anyone else, not just Muslims, but as Adam mentioned, the belief of anyone who's non-French is a lesser being, is
Well, which is kind of ironic. They eat frogs over there.
yeah.
And snails.
Actually, that was my
snails,
that was actually my bonus question that I was going to filibuster ask you.
Yeah,
Did you
and
have frog legs?
no, I did not have frog legs.
Good,
No.
good man, good
No.
man.
No, I'm a man of culture.
Sorry, as you were saying.
Cool. No, thanks for that, guys. I'll rattle off a few things.
Yeah.
So I think
Before
first
you
and
do,
foremost, Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up with my statement. So a study known as Ethnic Diversity and Social Trust, a narrative and meta-analysis review, found that looking at 87 studies looking into the relationship between ethnic diversity and social trust found a, quote, statistically significant negative relationship between ethnic diversity and social trust across all nations, end quote, even when controlling for minority background, socioeconomic background, crime, and inter-ethnic contact. That came out in March 2020 this year.
Man, it means we're all racist.
I don't. You see, that's the thing. It doesn't. I don't even see
Man,
it
I'm
as
so
like
sad
a.
now.
I don't think it means that people. Like racism is a survival mechanism. That's what it fundamentally is.
From an evolutionary
Yeah.
perspective,
yeah,
that tribe might kill you. So
Yeah.
So it's me against you.
yeah.
Well, and again, like when you don't make that assessment, if you're too trusting, it can be the difference between life or death. Doesn't matter if it's like someone from another tribe.
And it also,
I do. Let's
sorry.
say, for argument's sake, that study is accurate. Agree with it. I think it'd be really boring if we lived in a world where everyone was identical. There was.
We're all
We're vanilla.
I definitely
we
agree
all
with
wear
you.
grey
Vanilla?
and we're all bold and kind of like, I don't know if you guys saw that Futurama episode. It's like I forget what it was, but essentially there was like a planet and they were all just like they all just wore grey and they all wear like the same thing and they're all bald.
Imagine there was a country where everyone was like Boris Johnson.
Oh my god.
Good
bad
God.
Good
haircut
Lord.
and weird teeth.
Oh Lord.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, even if you look at, when it comes to diversity in cuisine, like we've been able to try so many different foods from all these different places, which, if there was no such thing as diversity, you probably wouldn't get the same experience.
meat pies.
Exactly.
Is that being? Have I gone too far?
Well, but yeah, well, I mean,
I actually like meat pies. I don't know.
I love
why
meat pies. I love
I
meat
love
pie.
meat
Yeah.
pies.
Yeah.
The French would probably like frog like meat pie. Just saying.
Just saying.
Could be a thing. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows,
But yeah,
man.
like look again, the differences between people are kind of important from an evolutionary perspective as well, because it's the difference between being able to survive in certain environments and in certain situations, and being homogenous actually makes us more, like that's actually the mindset that Nazi Germany had during World War II, where they thought that if everybody was like blonde and blue eyes, that would be like the master race. Now the problem there is they had a pretty flawed everybody kind of had a flawed understanding of evolution back then. But if everybody was just blonde and blue eyes, any kind of genetic defects or any kind of pathways that made them kind of susceptible to certain diseases or certain disasters, like they're just gone. It's gone in an instant. If you guys have ever watched what's the movie with Will Smith and it's like the end of the world and it's only him and a bunch of zombie people?
I'm Legend.
I'm Legend.
So in I Am Legend, they say that like the whole like the human population were wiped out except for like a couple of like 1 or 2% of the population, and the reason why those 2% of the population survived is because they were genetically different from the rest of the population.
Yep.
And so yeah, like while homogeneity is kind of like good in some aspect, being completely being completely the same isn't a solution either for human survival. Just saying.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
I might rattle off a few
Yes, go
things.
ahead.
So I think if we want to increase social cohesion within France and reduce both kind of the let's say these terrorist attacks as well as kind of far right attacks, I think one of the things is for people within the political sphere to not scapegoat minorities for political capital. I think that's an important step. I think the second thing is for the Muslim community in France to engage in the political process. I think that's absolutely important that they engage in the political process in France, participate in elections, have representatives that represent them, and their, that can relay their grievances, whatever grievances that may be. And I think, France is taking, although they've significantly reduced their refugee intake, they do have a large refugee population, and there's a lot of the funding that used to go towards integration, like helping refugees and immigrants integrate into the country, whether that's social programs, language, free language classes. Those things have largely been cut from budgets, not just in France, but in Australia as well. And we're finding that it's becoming more difficult for immigrants and refugees to have social programs that help them integrate. And I think that's an important step if we want to improve social cohesion. By and large, I think immigrants, Muslim or otherwise, want to integrate, but they don't know what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable in the new country that they've called home. So a program to help them, help them integrate, I think does help. And it certainly, when my parents came to Australia, that those programs existed in Australia, and they were immensely helpful. And I think for Muslims, apart from not just engaging in the political process, but learning to not react to every time that someone burns the Quran or depicts the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, there's other ways you can defend your faith and your religion. And part of that in the West is to engage in the political process, not to cut off the heads of people that do these things. So engage in the political process. And just the final kind of thing I would suggest is more Islamic schools in France. There's 300 Catholic schools. There's 100 Jewish schools in France. There's 20 Islamic schools only in France. And as I said before, a bulwark against religious extremism is to have is to increase religiosity, and that means whether that's because unfortunately France has radical secularism, so they won't teach Islam classes or religious classes within schools or government funded schools. So there has to be private schools where
and that's a common ground that we were talking about. How's the population supposed to know Muslims when they don't know anything about what they believe in?
Yeah, but like that's like saying like over here that they should be teaching like Islam in religious studies.
No,
right?
but at
Like,
least
it's
we have
not
Muslim
gonna...
schools here, and that has helped us curb a lot of these problems, right? Like we don't have ghettos like France does, right?
Yeah, just think about this, right? If most students, young people, spend more time on the internet, right, than they do in mosques or attending sermons by religious clerics.
Yeah.
So if you want to instill values around, kind of living together, social cohesion from an Islamic perspective, it has to be done in the home, and it has to be done within the schools. And
Sorry, yeah, no,
yeah,
sorry.
that's my point. I think
I was just going to say, how many like Islamic schools do we have in Australia? And what's the proportion?
We have Australia. I think there's, in terms of population, there's about 500,000 Muslims in Australia.
Yeah.
And in Victoria alone, there's probably more than a dozen Islamic schools at least.
Yeah.
And that's just schools, not including all of their campuses. If we include all of their campuses, there'd be 3 dozen. Easy.
Quite a few, and they
that's
are
just Victoria.
Yeah.
And there's
New
probably
South
a lot
Wales
more
is-
in
yeah.
New South Wales.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree. Yeah. Well, and there is a sizable Muslim population in Perth as well, so you can imagine there will be a few in Perth.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, education and the right education can solve a lot of problems within all communities. So when we give up fear mongering, when we stop feeling like everyone's out to get us, or and that goes on both sides. Like I literally just Googled France, and the first thing I see is on. Let me just read it out to you. So it's
Give me direct.
Before
give
you
me
do
France
that,
24.
before you do that, Samad, I
Yep.
just wanted to make one correction that I said. I said there was 300 Catholic schools and 100 private Jewish schools. It's actually 9,000 private Catholic schools and 300 private Jewish schools.
That is a really big.
and 20 private Muslim schools only.
Wow.
So
how did you get that off by like an extra 0?
I think
that's like a factor of 10. Damn.
Yeah, so it warranted a correction.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Samad.
No.
Yeah. So France 24 on the front page, it was written, Turkey's Erdogan is mobilizing Islamists against France. Now, when that's a very extreme statement to put out there. So it's kind of like saying that, okay, Turkey is sending out Islamists to attack France. So expect the worst in the next next coming days. So I think that kind of narrative being spun by the media, again, you're flaming you're going after a particular community who has been there for such a long time, without realizing by the way, we haven't spoken about an attack but it hasn't been confirmed of why it took place. But there's been attacks on Muslim women, who are wearing hijab.
Yeah, there was that one attack, but I think it's already been kind of confirmed what that was all about. Yeah, so for people who don't know, there was 2 Muslim women were recently stabbed in I think near the Eiffel Tower, and the altercation was over the other 2 women, the 2 French women, for not having their dogs on a leash. Now, I don't know what the whole like dogs on a leash thing, like the legality behind whether they should have had the dog on the leash. It doesn't really matter because it just escalated.
Yeah, near Eiffel Tower, I didn't notice dogs just running around. It's a very very it's supposed to be a very clean and very well maintained,
family friendly.
Very family friendly. There's a lot of cops, especially when I was there. So cop cars after cop cars.
Well, I think that's because they've had incidents like terrorist attacks, like near the Eiffel Tower. Like, don't they have like a wall or something? Like I'm pretty sure they like erected.
There is fencing around it.
Fencing.
Yeah, there is definitely fencing around it. Yeah.
So the altercation was like over the fact that they didn't have their dog on a leash, and like the women didn't feel safe, and so naturally the reaction was pull out a knife and stab them, obviously. But yeah, like those women, by the way, I'm being facetious, by the way, for the people playing at home. These women were drunk, allegedly too, so I don't think it is related to the
I don't think it is related to that particular attack. I wouldn't say that, but what I think there is a part to play. When people see someone who's dressed a certain way, and their first impulse is that this person could potentially do something to me. and it would be life threatening, right? Like
I
this
think
could
I
be a
think it's
potential.
less. I think it's even less than that. I think these like these people weren't really. They're not the sharpest tools in the shed. They were drunk,
Yeah.
and just because somebody like had the gall to tell them, hey, like we don't feel safe. Like, hey, can you put? They reacted in this way, right? Like it's ridiculous that anybody would respond to like just simple communication like, hey, can you just like put your dog on a leash? Again, we'll find out more. We'll find out more.
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
I see it. I think that, yeah, I know you're giving them the benefit of the doubt, but
Well, no. I like because it doesn't seem like this was them targeting like these women for being Muslims.
no, I
Um,
think it's
I,
just
I, I think there's a if it's not them, I don't think
they didn't go out of their way
went
to,
out of their way to
yeah,
target
yeah,
target
the,
them.
the
and I
women.
think that's the important distinction here,
Yeah,
right? Because
but
there's people
I'm
who are like,
sure.
oh, this is a retaliation. I
No,
think
No,
this
no,
is
no,
more
no,
of
no.
a
I'm not
this is
saying
like a
retaliation.
coincidence,
Look,
right?
what I'm saying is the way the media is portraying Muslims, is, these people who are bringing down, France as a country. They're not adding any value to the country, and that kind of narrative sticks in the back of your head. So when you get provoked by one of them, you're more you're you're not going to be as considerate.
I mean, let's say
Yeah.
I think it's fair, very fair to say that these women have lived in France for more than a day, and they've probably taken that dog to the Eiffel Tower in the past, and probably have been told in the past by other people, put your dog on a leash. So otherwise, it's a confluence of coincidences that these women, this is a Muslim woman first time approached these other women to put their dog on a leash and were savagely attacked with a knife. I think there's just too many coincidences there for me to say that the I don't think it was retaliation, but it was certainly some animosity that's been harbored by the recent events that's happened, and
And if your
it just
president kind
I
of
mean,
feels,
I'm going to resist putting any kind of motives behind like the reason why they did so because it's implying intent, right?
not necessarily, man. I think, like I said, they didn't go there with the motive to do anything like that. It just happens.
Yeah, like I
It's the
mean, like
person they come up.
it definitely
It's the
falls into
person
something
they.
like a hate crime because they clearly said I think
Yeah,
they said like dirty Arab or something
yeah.
like that.
So why would they say
So
that? Why would they say that? If
well,
they, if they
because
could have.
again, it's probably the first time they've ever had somebody tell them what like
I
hey
don't
like
know.
How
I
do you
doubt
know
it's the
that?
first time that because I mean, I doubt it's if you've got a dog on.
well, it doesn't necessarily have to be the first time. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating that part. But again, these women were also drunk as well. Again, that doesn't excuse the fact that they stabbed people, right? We
People
don't
drink a
excuse,
lot in
yeah,
France, by the way.
we don't excuse drunk drivers when they're
Yeah.
drunk, for their actions either. But it does put them in an inebriated state that causes, them to take more risk-taking actions, right? Risk-taking behaviors, sorry, that's associated with drinking as well. So yeah, again, it yeah, it's obviously again not condoning the attacks. I'm just saying that to say that it was any like that it's got connections to the recent like beheadings and all that like bit of a stretch,
Not a direct connection. I don't think.
or even an indirect connection.
Well, would you say that if let's say terrorist attacks perpetrated by Muslims in France, that the immediate aftermath of that, there's a spike in Islamophobic attacks on women in France? Would you say there's no link between
There
A and
isn't
B?
there isn't a spike of like attacks on Muslim women like in as a direct result of like Islamic terrorist attacks either. Like where's the depiction of that?
So that sorry, I'm confused.
Well,
So
like where's the pattern of like people
there's
attacking
okay.
women
So
just
just to
yeah,
be
but
clear
like
about this, there is a
that are motivated by these attacks. Like that's what I'm trying to
no,
get
not
here.
retaliatory.
Yeah,
I'm
but that's the
saying
important
that
distinction here.
no. What I'm saying is that retaliatory would be a direct link. An indirect
Yeah.
link would be there's a terrorist attack perpetrated by one or more Muslims, and in the immediate aftermath of that terrorist attack, there's a spike in Islamophobic attacks against Muslims, particularly visibly Muslim.
There might be. Yeah, there might be.
Well, I think what I'm saying is that there certainly is.
Okay.
And so that link between A and B is not direct, but it's indirect, because there's a sense immediate in the aftermath of such an event, because there's constant media bombarding us with, anti-Muslim sentiment. Politicians are getting up and capitalizing on those things, and then the discussion about women and their hijab for some reason tends to come up, and so people feel a little bit more energized on the streets to attack vulnerable women in Islamic garb, and it's not a phenomena that's unique to France. It's happened in the United States in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 and other terrorist attacks. It's happened in Australia, and that there was straight after that what was that in Sydney there was the Lint Cafe attack, and then there was the social media campaign to sit with a Muslim. I forgot that hashtag thing.
Sit with a Muslim?
I think it was like I'll ride with you or something like that.
I'll ride with you, like on public transport, because there was Muslim women were being attacked on public transport, and so
I guess the main thing that I'm trying to make sure that I guess people understand that this like indirect attack, like I'm just not like fully convinced that they like felt energized to attack like these women.
What could explain the phenomena?
I mean, it's more likely that they stabbed these women because they again got into an altercation with these women in the first place, and two, they were drunk, they were under the influence.
Yeah,
that's far more like likely as the motivating factors as to why.
The reason I disagree with that is because if I look at globally the phenomena in the immediate aftermath of a terrorist attack perpetrated by a Muslim, we see a spike in attacks against Muslim women. And again, I'm not saying that this is certain that the beheading of Samuel Paty energized them to stab these women. I think it's they were intoxicated.
Indirectly energized them.
Yeah, indirectly, in the sense that what else would explain the phenomena that we see globally, and therefore this kind of, and then we see in the immediate aftermath of that something like this happening. Then it's more likely, and I'm not saying it's the reason. I'm saying it's more likely the reason than not. And again, I'm not saying again this would go through the courts, evidence would be presented, and I'm sure all of those things will happen. But if I look at it just statistically, that we know this phenomena happens, I would see there's a higher likelihood of this being part of that phenomena, then it's just a random attack. I certainly don't think it's just if they were approached by just a bunch of white French men that
I actually thought this attack was by French men initially, because it's very rare for stabbings. Sorry, someone.
Are you talking? Oh, by French. Okay, no, go on. What were you saying?
By French men.
I'm with you. I thought immediately that it's a bunch of French guys attacking. Muslim women.
Well, and again, part of that goes down to the human criminality behavior, right? Like men are statistically more likely to, participate or engage in risk-taking behaviors, and part of that involves engaging in criminality, right? Stabbing people is a form of criminality. So when I first heard about this, I thought, this must have been done by a bunch of French men. But as you read into the story, it's a bunch of French women and they're intoxicated, and they got into a verbal argument with these women. It seems to kind of just to put out again not condoning the attacks happened to the.
You don't. We know, Adam. You don't need to. You don't need to say that.
But I think it's an important caveat if we're going to kind of explore the reason, because again, it is happening in the backdrop, and it definitely isn't assisting with the social cohesion in France. Because now, like you said, if this does result in people, seeing this as something like an attack on the Muslim community, it's only going to snowball into
it's tit for tat. Yeah.
It's only going to just like roll over into and knowing the situation in France, it probably and the ongoing case with the Charlie Hebdo stuff, it's more tensions are going to happen over the next couple of months. And also because things like the lockdown and coronavirus isn't going to help either, right? Everybody's actually, I don't know what the situation in France is with the coronavirus.
Oh, let's not even go to coronavirus. Otherwise, we will not get to our political prediction.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
We're already at the 90
we can't clickbait the audience.
No, not again. We've done this on 3 occasions. We promised to tell you our predictions today. So, who wants to go first? Summer.
Go
on. Go on.
I wanted to actually reveal and expose. Because he's not here. Tak isn't here. He actually told me who he thinks is going to win 2020. And he thinks it's going to be Kanye West. Kanye West. That's his take. He's not here to defend himself or correct me. So till then, that is his take at the moment. But yeah, no, sorry. But in all seriousness, I'll let
where's Kanye doing on the polls? Is he
actually? No idea. I mean, you can vote for anybody.
Yeah, you can
in America. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can vote for anybody here too, right? I'm pretty sure you can write in, you can do a write-in and be like, oh, this guy. Again, Australian voting completely different. But yeah, sorry. I won't interrupt.
I think before the whole quote unquote debate started, I was pretty convinced that this is going to be an easy one for Trump. But I think as the time goes on and as things are continuously changing, with his stance on, I'm just reading the comments, but
Biden's favorite at the moment.
No. Kanye's paying
5-1. We have 5-1 to win. Man, hey, I don't know, man. If he does win, that's some pretty good returns, right?
Yeah. Now, so in terms of you look at someone like Joe Biden, and we talked about this. He's not the most charismatic person, right? And he doesn't have that cult following that Trump does. But what's happened is, in recent times, as you would notice, Trump is he's not being favored, and there's multiple things that have contributed into that, and because the bar was set so low for Biden, he has done a lot better than anyone expected, right? And based on that, it's hard for me to say who would exactly win. I don't believe
you have to though.
You have to pick a winner. You have to, and if they lose, you will be ridiculously mocked. That's what we are in this
for 4 years.
4 years. No.
No pressure.
No pressure. I mean, yeah. Look, sorry, no. Go, Samad.
If you look at the polls, Biden's the clear winner. Looking at the swing states, but again, what does all that mean? What it means is, people favor him, but are they going to go out and vote for him, right? But we look at the early voting numbers; they're exponentially higher than what it was last time, despite the virus, despite all the complications that's been set into place. So yeah, look, Biden does look like the winner for the 2020 elections. It's going to be.
Gonna lock it in, Eddie. Gonna lock it in.
Yeah, you look at even something like what happened with Rudy Giuliani. I think that also doesn't shine, a good light on, a conservative government, right? You have, Rudy Giuliani just being a creep and getting busted by Borat. So, Um, and if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what happened, and it was pretty obvious. He's trying to swing it, but it's pretty obvious what he was trying to do, and yeah. So again, on his campaign, it doesn't really shine a good light, and to the point where Trump's been saying a lot of minuscule things to try and swing voters. Like I think he was talking about some seniors, and he was telling them how Joe Biden's going to cut their air cons during summer, which was I thought that was pretty hilarious. Like it doesn't really make much of a yeah. It's such a non-argument.
He's not a facts guy.
Yeah,
though.
he's not a facts guy. He's never been one.
And turn it down, mate.
So yeah, I'll toss it back to Simon, see what he says. Yeah.
Well, put on the spot.
Maybe.
Oh, right. No! You don't get to deflect from this.
All right. So I think it'll be a close race.
I think you and me have the same opinion on this. Oh, we lost him. We lost him.
What happened? Oh,
I don't know. We lost Simon.
Oh, there he is.
Am I back?
He's back. Tried to get him.
You're really mounting on that suspense.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me just get straight into the crux of it. Right. I think it's going to be a close race. I do think that that given some of the swing states, the battleground states, we find Biden to be ahead in I believe so far 5 of those battleground states. So 3 of them substantially. So, but when I say substantially, by 5 or 6 percentage points or larger, and the other ones he's leading those battleground states by slightly above the margin of error for the polls. So still very close, I think. But the reason I'm going to give it a Biden win is this time around in 2020. There's significantly less undecided voters than there was in 2016. So that's kind of number one, which means that which also means that the polls, are likely a little bit more accurate than they were in 2016. The pollsters have adjusted their methodology, although polls are never perfect. They're a pretty good indicator and have been in the past, except for 2016, which I think the reason Clinton lost is because I think we discussed this last week, or I should say on Friday, the actions of James Comey.
And people being reluctant
one.
To go
and 2, because Bernie got screwed over so hard in the primaries, on the DNC primaries, that Bernie supporters refused to go and vote for Hillary Clinton.
Well, I think on top of the fact that the DNC email leaks actually revealed that the DNC actually
was corrupt.
Was corrupt, and they actually chose Hillary Clinton as a candidate. Because in the end, right, for people who don't know, like the DNC is a political organization, but they themselves don't have to follow a democratic process in order to put forward a candidate for the election. It is kind of ironic, right? So it could be like Bernie and like Joe Biden this time around, and because the DNC don't like Bernie. I mean, Bernie's an independent. Like he's been running Democrat, but he's usually an independent. So. Yeah, and I think some people even voted for Trump because out of spite because Bernie didn't get the nomination.
Yeah, so I've got about 12 reasons. I'm just going to rattle them off.
Go ahead.
Why I think Biden's going to win. So number 1, because Clinton's not in the race. Number 2.
Actually, can I actually, because I got some notes as well here. Just so people know. Biden has a higher favorability compared to Clinton. He's got a plus 1.6% higher favorability, while Clinton had negative 12.6. Imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't
have to, but imagine. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So yes, Clinton's not in the race. There's significantly less undecided voters. The polls. So that's number 2. Number 3, the pollsters have updated their methodology. Number 4, Biden has appealed to black voters due to his proximity to Obama. Number 5, that his VP is also a black American, and so will also appeal to the black voters. Am I up to 6? So
sure.
as I've mentioned, Biden is leading in quite a large number of swing states. Number 7, also appeals to female voters because his VP is female, and he has significant support from suburban women, which Trump is losing, by the way. So Trump has been, due to COVID-19. So just as a phenomena, mothers are scared to death of COVID-19 coming into contact with their children, scared to death. And because of Trump's lack of or inaction on COVID-19, a lot of suburban women, mostly mothers, have basically this time around, those who voted for Trump have said, it come out in large numbers to say they're not happy with the inaction from Trump, and how that might impact their children, even though statistically speaking, children are less likely to have negative effects from COVID, or that we understand to date. And so he's losing support from suburban women, which actually tipped him over to win the election the last time. In fact, in one of his rallies, maybe sarcastically, he said, suburban women, will you please vote for me?
Yeah, I did see that.
So,
that was pretty...
YouTube that clip, YouTube that, and you'll find him saying that. So the other one was the Sanders supporters that in 2016, they either refused to vote for Clinton or flipped to spite Clinton, and the DNC voted for Trump. And in this time around, Sanders has told his supporters to go and vote for Biden. He's made that very, very clear, which he did not do the last time around. So good on Sanders. So all of those reasons, I think there's a few others that I might remember. Yes, very, very big reason. Roger Ailes, who was the chairman of Fox News during the 2016 campaign, so across 2015, 2014, 2015, Roger Ailes was the chairman of Fox News. Roger is dead now. So Fox News, while still favoring Trump, now has a handful, maybe like half a dozen commentators on Fox that are very pro-Trump. So Lou Dobbs, like Hannity, Fox and Friends, and there's a few others scattered around, but largely the other
What happened there? Oh, you went Bing Bong. Bing Bong again.
Bing Bong. Oh no, they're trying to get him. Clinton's trying to get him. He has evidence leading to the arrest of Hillary Clinton. They're trying to get rid of him.
So where was I? Yes. So Roger Ailes, who was critical to the Trump campaign in 2016, and he had the entire Fox News network behind him, which he has part of now, like a fraction of at the moment. And the last reason is all of the key people in the 2016 election, and his campaign people are in prison. So if I rattle off their names, Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos.
George Papadopoulos is free, isn't he?
He was found guilty, but he's free at the moment. Yes. Yeah. Michael Flynn.
Michael Flynn is also not in jail.
He's, I think, awaiting sentence at the moment.
I think his case might actually be dropped by the FBI. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Michael Flynn's case.
See where that goes. So Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, I think, is in
prison.
jail.
So yeah, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, and there's probably another two people names that I'm missing. So very, very critical to the 2016 elections. So we'll see. I think given all of those reasons, there's probably about a dozen that I've rattled off. I think it's a Biden win.
Nice.
There's a sub theory.
Oh, sub theory.
Which
how many theories are you going to rattle off at the
so
moment?
no, as in
really
the other theory. This is the Biden. This is the Biden, victory theory.
Mm.
The other one is that like 2000, which is Bush versus Gore, that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically handed the victory to Bush. I'm not going to get into the issue there, but there's if one of the networks, Fox News, calls the election in favor of Trump, which literally they shouldn't be doing until they're absolutely 100% sure. But if let's say they do, then it's very likely that the Supreme Court will have to get involved. And in which case, I think the Supreme Court will give it to Trump.
If they have like a similar situation.
Yeah, if it's a similar situation, the incumbent will likely win.
Well, yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you really think about it, right now, did they?
They also have the Conservatives have a 6-3 majority.
6-3,
in the
yeah.
Supreme
Yeah, I was just
Court.
gonna say they have a majority. In
Yeah,
the
so
Supreme Court.
they recently had Amy Coney Barrett come in as the new Supreme Court justice. And so you're done. Sorry, I don't want to.
No, I'm sorry, I'm done. That's just that was my sub theory that if it goes to Supreme Court, Trump wins.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sub theory. I don't think you're wrong with that, because I think if it does end up going, and I think that's kind of what it's kind of positioned to be a little bit. Like, for example, I think like Pennsylvania, there was recent. I think the Pennsylvanian GOP tried to put in something to the Supreme Court about like I think mail-in voting and signatures, which was rejected. Because it was like a 4-4 kind of even split. But with Amy Coney Barrett now coming, that might kind of tip a little bit over to whether or not it's going to make because it's going to be a definitive decision, not a something that they keep kind of sending back up to the court. So that might swing, Pennsylvania to some respect. And I think you're completely right. With that, this is going to be because people are saying, oh, this is a blowout, right? This is going to be something that's a blowout for Trump, or this is a blowout for Biden. I don't think that's the case. I think even both campaigns have said that they believe that the margin is much narrower than what is being presented.
Well, it's very interesting what they say about the polls. How the RNC is saying, don't believe in the polls because you look at last election, it won't be that clear cut, and
I mean,
interestingly enough,
Texas...
DNC is also saying the same thing. They're saying don't believe the polls because it.
Don't be confident.
Don't be too confident. Don't be too confident. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. I think like even Texas. I think Texas, according to Real Clear Politics, is still kind of grayed out. Like it's still like you can go either way. And to be fair, like we actually talked about it before on a previous podcast about like Texas Dallas, is kind of Dallas and Austin and some of the more like populated areas are more blue compared to the rest of Texas. So it's not completely and it's not completely like beyond reproach that Texas might flip. Who knows? It could be this election. I don't necessarily think so, but like obviously there's still going to be more polling. There's still going to be more analysis being done. Some of the other things that I've seen is that when it comes to voting, Trump supporters are more likely to vote in person than Biden supporters, while Biden supporters are more likely to vote by absentee or mail-in ballots. This is according to Pew Research, and also YouGov polling says the same thing.
Well, you also have to remember Trump just casted his vote, and he also said the exact same thing when he went into...
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he said the exact same thing.
Okay.
He was saying, he was telling, of course, he's, when he's addressing the public, he's mostly addressing his, his voter base, right? And he said the same thing. He said how reliable going into the polling station is, and how unreliable
Well, if you look at the margin, again, this is from October 8th, 2020, from Pew Research. They had that Trump's supporters were like 50% of them would vote in person, while only 20% of Biden supporters would vote in person, and then Biden supporters would vote through like mail-in ballots at 51%, while Trump supporters were 20%. So they're kind of like evening out. Like if you think about it, right? And this is part of the reason why I say that it's much more closer than people might think, because even the way people are voting, can sway. And the thing is, and that's the thing, early polling isn't always the best. It's going to be like who comes in, because there'll be a massive wave of people who will be coming in, and you will see the results, because that's essentially the same thing that happened in 2016 too. And if you look at if you look at all the polling data, it does say that like Biden has that advantage. I'm going to go against the grain and just say, you know what, maybe Trump has it. I'm just going to go against.
We need one dissenting voice.
We need one. And look,
voice.
it can't be Tack, because he said Kanye West, right? Like come on.
Because apparently God spoke to him and told him that he needs to be the president, bro.
Wait, is that what?
On the Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh, really? Oh, damn it! You know what? I really need to.
Yeah, you need to watch it.
Good? It's really good.
I've only seen the snippets.
So
realized that he's a big Star Wars fan. So
we have one question from Still Traveling, and I think I know who that is, but we'll keep the person anonymous. The question is to all of you guys: who would you vote for, and one reason why? That's a really good question, because we've given out predictions on who we think will win, but who would we vote for? So my answer was Still Traveling. That's a personal question.
Actually, I just wanted to finish off like my kind of rattling, because I said I'm going again. This is the reason why it's like a close election, right? Because I think that for example, I think George Bush and Al Gore, right? That was a really tight race. I think it was like 271. Like that's what George Bush got, right? Like for like barely scraping by.
In fact, it was Florida, and it was a matter of 535 individual votes.
Yeah,
that was the difference.
There was one state where I think the whoever ended up becoming the governor or whatever was elected purely by drawing a name out of the hat. I'm not even joking, right? Because the votes were the same, and so they just drew out of the hat, and the guy won because he drew out of the hat. Can you imagine?
That's what the Supreme Court will do. All right.
Yeah, all of them will put their hand. So I think that and even so there was a research done by Cloud Research, and they did a polling study, and they also found that 10% of Trump supporters were more likely to be untruthful when it came to phone surveys, compared to Biden supporters, which were 5%. So again, like there may be people who are less.
10% of Trump supporters are liars.
Compared to 5% of Biden supporters.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So twice as much, I guess. But I guess it's just in terms of like comfortability, I guess, with their political, like being open about their politics. Like,
when was that? That's kind of statistic. When was that from?
That was from this year, actually.
Okay.
So let me just see. I'll put it in the chat for us to have a look at.
Just curious, because I know that certainly in 2016, a lot of people didn't publicly profess their support for Trump, but in the polling booths, when they were alone by themselves with no one watching, except God. Why we need to install cameras in the polling booth. They voted for Trump.
For Trump, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I think what's going to be very apparent is when people just physically. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say people were just not comfortable voting for Hillary Trump. That she makes you uncomfortable, man.
But I think
the
also,
way she is, she's
but I think
like
also publicly, people probably didn't feel comfortable saying
voting for Trump.
For Trump, right?
Yeah,
so
but people thought he was the lesser of two evil, and that's
And it might be the same case here. So I don't want to completely discount the notion. And we're going to be finding out more, like closer to the election. It's going to be very apparent.
Yep.
When physical voting is going to get counted. The other thing I'm also kind of concerned about is, with the massive amount of mail-in voting that's going to happen, whether or not we'll be able to get a result on the night, right?
We won't. Look, that's just what I'm worried about. Is even forget the night. I don't think we should. The networks should announce a winner until they're absolutely sure, which could take weeks.
And they should take their time. They should take their
well,
time.
yeah. Well, but here's the problem, right? So, I actually mentioned it on a previous podcast before that, if they have a cutoff date for when they kind of count votes, that's going to disproportionately affect mail-in voting and absentee voting. So and I think I'll have to pull up my stats again to look at this, but I think the vast majority of rejected ballot votes are usually due to it coming late.
That you can mostly it's Democrat voters because liberals can be a bit, let's say, lazy when it comes to voting.
A bit complacent, a bit too reliant on the system, right? Like
but the problem is that. But it's not even necessarily lazy, because I wouldn't even necessarily look at this time with COVID-19. Do you think people want to necessarily
especially
go
in a place
to the
like
polls
America?
and do it?
Yeah,
But
I guess.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing. And like I mentioned before, Biden supporters, Democrats, are more likely to vote via absentee or mail-in ballots, right? So they're going to be disproportionately affected if they do decide to say, hey, you know what, we're only going to do November 3rd and that's it. I don't think it's going to be the case, but that's obviously going to be something that might be taken to the Supreme Court. There's going to be a lot of fighting in that regard. So it'll be very interesting to see what the finalized voting is. And I think it's going to be dependent on decisions like that. But I don't know at the moment what it is. But yeah, sorry.
All right, Adam,
I won't take any more.
Adam, answer the question. Who would you vote for?
Who would I vote for?
He said Trump. No.
I'm keeping my opinions to myself, mate.
Yeah.
Really? So, although I did say it's a personal question, I'll say this much without saying who I'd vote for. I would prefer a conservative House of Representatives, a liberal Senate, and a conservative Supreme Court.
Okay.
And a liberal presidency.
Okay.
So the reason, so just because I think I would prefer a majority conservative Supreme Court, because I think legislation needs to generally shouldn't change on a whim, and it should be based on some traditional interpretations of the Constitution. And if there's any changes that need to be made, it needs to be an amendment to the Constitution. So I kind of lean towards a conservative Supreme Court, and I would lean towards a conservative House of Representatives, but a liberal presidency and a liberal Senate.
Okay, interesting. I actually have no idea, in terms of the system in America. What's the difference there? What's the?
So Senate has a lot more power. Things have to go through the House and then to the Senate, and they could be vetoed or stopped. All the big decisions around, voting for. For example, voting for the Supreme Court judge. Right. That's a Senate vote. Impeachment, that's a Senate vote. So things that affect.
But doesn't the House? It's bipartisan, isn't it? For an impeachment, because the House.
Impeachment, it has to be 2/3.
Yeah. So, but in a sense that the House can bring forward an impeachment, but then the Senate can just reject it. So
yes.
And so in that respect, wouldn't it be? I guess it's checks and balances. Usually, if you're going to impeach someone, everybody's got to agree that the charges are valid.
Yeah. So the reason I say that is even organizations, like you need to have, a bimodal organization to be successful. An organization like a business needs to have one arm of the business that is hyper innovative and moves super quickly, and the other one that needs to say puts in all the checks and balances and say, hang on a minute, we need to consider legislation, we need to consider find implications with accounting practices, this and that. So all of those checks and balances need to be in place, and I would rather like part of the government, like the administration, move quickly, and then it's up to the House to slow it down a little bit. And then when things get escalated, it boils down to constitutional concerns, and that should be a conservative interpretation of the Constitution.
But I guess realistically, in terms of what we actually see in practice, is like a lot of like political, like I guess like what is it, gatekeeping, right? When you have like, I guess like, for example, if you have like a liberal like left-leaning president, and then you have a right-leaning Senate, the Senate generally like doesn't fall lock, key, and step with the Democrat, like a Democratic, and I mean that happened under Obama, right? Like for example, I think like Obama tried to put in like a justice, and the Senate's like, nope, we can't put a new justice in because you're leaving, right? That's what they initially said for Obama's initial pick, and then Trump comes in, and Trump says, hey, I want these three people in, and they're like, all right,
no problem. Yeah.
How about you,
Samad?
Well, I won't even go that deep. I think I'm going to look at what's happened in recent times, and just based on that, I think I'll be very hesitant to vote for anyone who, firstly, openly lies to their public, and
all politicians.
And on top of that, also misleads the general public.
With Trump, I mean, with health concerns, absolutely. That's just
that's just absolutely ridiculous. Like I have not come across a world leader, by the way, someone who's considered the leader of the free world, to say, oh, I was just joking. Like who does that when you have people who don't have health insurances, who are scared of what's going to happen to them, trying to inject themselves with bleach? Like that just blows my mind. Like that's absolutely outrageous. And you can call it whatever, but I would not vote for anyone like that, because this guy's getting old. I don't know what he's going to do next. He's losing his
marbles.
His marbles. Simply put, I don't think his state of mind is in the right place. And I think again, him lying about getting a vaccine, which is just around the corner, putting up unrealistic timelines which have no substance to it. There's absolutely no study that says that the vaccine will be out in this X amount of weeks, because it all depends on testing and approval and then mass production. So there's too many steps involved. He's lying to the public. He's trying to save his neck. He's trying to use it as an excuse to stay in power. And of course, like his support for extreme elements. So why would I say anything otherwise? Like I don't, you can say whatever, but it's pretty obvious that he's been hesitant to condemn white extremism and white supremacy. Yeah, it took a while. He did eventually, but there was a level of hesitance. And
so I want to come to a comment from Ali Qureshi. Two comments actually, and I think there's some support for him in the chat. So I want to address this. If anyone, so this is not a comment from Ali. If anyone votes Republican, they are either racist or okay with racism. I want to address that comment because a lot of people that are voting for Trump are voting for him, certainly, let's say, because he glosses over some racism within from his supporters, but a large number of that comes from people who are pro-life and as they don't think Trump is a man of good character. They don't think Trump behaves like a president. They don't like the fact he comes after people and uses obscenities and attacks them.
Yeah.
But the
Also, his
issue
misogynistic
for them is
traits.
not racism. For them, the issue is abortion. For them, the issue is how they feel their religion has been like Christianity is under attack, and they feel like this president is going to
Protect Christianity.
is going to save the babies from being aborted, and bring allow Christmas to be celebrated again, because it hasn't been celebrated in America for hundreds of years. They stopped celebrating Christmas until Trump came to power. So they feel this that despite all of his flaws, his only redeemable quality is that he'll support some conservative Christian things that are important to conservative Christians. So that while I agree that some of his supporters are racist, maybe I'll even go as far as to say maybe a large number, but certainly there's also a significant number of those who cannot side with the Democrats because of their position on abortion and their hyper secularism.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like for example, you could be like a single issue voter, and be like, hey, I just like people who are anti-abortion, like Simon said. Sorry, that are anti-abortion. Yeah. So yeah, they could just vote even though they might not like the guy. And the thing is, I don't even think most people, I don't think aren't super like enthusiastic for Biden, but it's more that they're enthusiastic to get rid of Trump, right? Like it is that they see as, hey, Biden, maybe he was, maybe I wanted Bernie, maybe I wanted Amy Klobuchar, right? Nobody's ever said that, but I'm just saying maybe that's what they want. No, well, yeah, everybody wanted Tulsi, let's face it, or Yang Gang, right? Yeah. Maybe they wanted one of those, but they're like, you know what, I'm, even though I don't necessarily agree with everything, Joe Biden says, he's the better option than Trump, and that's how they're voting.
Look, Biden is a far better candidate than Hillary was, and I think people.
I think that's bipartisan, right?
Yeah. Well, Ali, who isn't? Let's be honest. In the American, in the American politics. So
isn't she Indian?
So what?
Like an Indian Zionist?
Yeah, I mean,
you can be an evangelical Zionist.
You can definitely be an evangelical Zionist. Most evangelicals are considered Zionists.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
don't have to be.
When I think Zionism, first it comes to like Jewish Zionism, but it is.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. Is she supposed to be Jewish? Is she Jewish? I thought she was.
No, you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah.
I know, but when people usually say that, it's usually a form of Jewish Zionism is what they refer to. So what kind of Zionist is she?
Well, Ali can probably. I think she's. Well, I think what.
Bernie's principal. You asked me who is it? Well, I mean, look, the problem with Bernie is he used to complain about billionaires and millionaires, but now that he's a millionaire, all of a sudden, millionaires aren't a problem. It's just a billionaire.
Yeah, I think what Ali is referring to is maybe her support for Israel. Because I think that's usually what it really comes down to, right? But
isn't that most Americans? American.
Why do you think? No,
even Biden,
not even most Jewish Americans.
No.
But I'm saying
there is a strong lobby.
Biden pro-Israel, isn't he?
Who?
Biden would be.
Yeah, the Democrats are. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what I said. I was like, most people up in.
What about Bernie?
Politics.
Is Bernie? He is a socialist, but I don't know if he's pro
Israel. I don't.
I,
I'm not too
yeah, he gets
sure.
attacked by Zionist Jews as being a
Yeah, and he
Self-hating
he is
Jew.
a Jew, right? Like,
Yeah.
but can't catch a break. Him and his
No.
three houses can't catch a break, mate. Bernie is anti-Zionist. Okay, interesting.
And what about Stein? What do you think of Still Traveling's comment? Because I think it's very close to what you were talking about. Talking
So
about
will
the
it make the comment about what makes them overlook all of these red flags?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
It's
Simon,
a
single issue
self-serving
voters.
purpose. Yeah, it's a
Single issue
self-serving.
voters. For them,
Single issue voters, yeah.
racism is not something they experience. So for them, that's not an issue.
By the
For
way,
them,
most
the
deny
issue,
it. Most deny the existence of
yeah,
racism. You look at someone
yeah.
like Ben Shapiro, who's a conservative Jew, completely like overlooks a lot of these things. He doesn't even believe in systemic racism. So there's a lot of people like that. If you cut out a lot of those things from the mix, you have nothing to feel bad about. Call it a myth.
Yeah. It's and anything else we want to add, Adam?
No,
we
I really didn't expect us to talk about Zionists.
That came completely.
I'm glad
out
we
of
did.
left
I'm glad we
field.
did. Yeah, I think that's us for the show, and I think yeah, thanks
What
for
about
everybody tuning in.
if the viewers
Oh,
have
yeah.
any
Oh yeah, I guess
parting
last
questions, feel free to type some up.
Yeah, well,
Within the next couple of seconds would be very nice. But yeah, besides that, I think we've covered everything for today.
yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
we've
we
even
really
given our
appreciate-
predictions, guys.
Yeah,
Our
finally.
Yes,
predictions.
we'll see.
And then next thing you know, it's Kanye West is the president.
Kanye, could you imagine what an upset that would be? All the mail-in voting, and the Supreme
So
Court sides with him.
They're like, you know what?
I reckon Kim Kardashian's got a chance. 2028,
2028
Kim Kardashian.
could be. Well, she'd run as a GOP.
Probably not.
Well, because I'm pretty sure she's voting for Trump.
Who knows?
Yeah. Well, because I think I forget what interview it was on. But she didn't mention who she was voting for. Which is kind of highly implying that she's voting for Trump.
No,
which-
it's maybe, I don't know.
I mean,
It's hard to say.
Yeah,
You
well,
can
I mean,
even-
that's the thing.
What about-
I don't think it's completely like beyond reproach because she did help. I think she worked with Trump rather to
for the prison
to-
reform.
Yeah,
with the
I
prison
don't.
reform.
I know we said we're going to wrap up, but I do not understand why some people say that they will not work with Trump. If you're trying to change the state
Have
of
to
your
work with
community,
Trump. Yeah, you have to work
and
with the
incumbent.
president.
The incumbent is even if the incumbent wears a pointy white hat, right? Then you have to. That's the incumbent. That's the president. That person
Just
has
gotta
some
make
power.
it work.
You have to work with them.
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, I'm sure we disagree with lots of things that everyone says, but when it comes to making changes in your community, you have to work with people that you disagree with, and so this backlash against Ice Cube,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that he's stood his ground, unlike 50 Cent.
Hey, the man didn't want to be 20 Cent, and then what? His ex or something?
Yeah, it's like she will
on
pay
a
for
date with him or
that.
something like that.
She's like, no,
I
she's
mean,
like, I'll pay your taxes.
pay your taxes down. I mean, that's a lot of taxes at 60%, right? 62%, something, whatever it may be. But yeah, like I agree because like when I saw the stuff about Ice Cube, it's like the guy's just trying to work within the system, right? Like even if it's better to work within the system than not, like
it's better to engage in the political process than not to.
Yeah,
weird.
If you want to make a
There's no
change.
point in being bystanders. You're not going to make a difference. You're going
Well, I think the thing is like a lot of people
Martin Luther King,
Yeah,
and a clear
you
example,
go back,
right?
Anyone in time who's wanted to like bring about a change, you have to work with the the ruling party, and that's just the way it is.
But I think like a lot of people feel that if they do work with like Trump or whoever, or someone they politically disagree with, then that means that's like a betrayal, right? Like that's a betrayal to like maybe their ideology or like what they believe in because I'm working with this person. But if AOC, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ted Cruz can like kind of like come together on certain issues, like I think people can work together and at least solve some of the problems that we have, and that kind of relates. Sorry.
Otherwise, you become completely partisan, and no one achieves anything.
I agree.
Yeah. Social cohesion, guys. Let's do it.
Make it happen. Go home and do it today, tonight.
Right
I don't
now.
know. Right now.
Right now.
Anyway,
right now.
let's end there, guys. Thank you for listening. Are you guys running a show on Friday? Adam, do you want to?
Really comes down to
Hopefully.
what our boy Tak is doing. If he's
I
available.
think he's busy.
Everyone get online, reach out to Tak, give him some encouragement, and he'll show up on Friday.
Yeah, say his name 3 times in the mirror and he'll appear. That's what I've been told.
It works.
It works. Good night, everyone.
Yeah, good night.